There's a contemporary historian. His name is Yuval Harari, that maybe some of you have heard of or read some of his books. He's a contemporary historian. And he was recently asked if there was hope for humanity. And he said, humankind can rise to the occasion if we keep our fears under control and be a bit more humble about our views. And those are two of the things that I try to do at Building Bridgers. What I hope to impart to you tonight, because when I used to go to Toastmasters, they would say only do 3 big topics, so I'm going to try to do that. So my 3 big topics are hope, inspiration, and what you can do, what you personally can do to bridge divides. Political polarization is arguably our biggest problem now. I've been in the business for about 4 years, and I always come back to, unless we start working on this issue person to person, we're never going to solve the bigger problems that are facing us. We just keep on gridlocking. So to my first point, what gives me hope? There were 2 studies done in the last 3 years, both by the same group. It's a group called More in Common. And the first study they did was called the Hidden Tribes study. And what they did is they took the US voters and they put them into 7 categories. And what they found out is that on either side of the spectrum, about 8% on the left and 6% on the right, were the hyper partisans, the loud ones, the really activists on both sides. And what they called the middle, the 86%, they called them the exhausted majority, which I really related to. So it gives me hope because I think we're much less polarized than we would believe through our politicians or through our media, through certain institutions. The other study they did was called the perception gap. And that's where they took, you can go online actually and take this quiz yourself. It's not very long, perceptiongap.us. And what they found is that most people looked at the other side as having much more extreme views than they actually did. So why is that important? Why it is important is, and what I really try to do in my classes is really kind of knock down the way that we stereotype and generalize about the other side, as well as demonize. So for instance, on an issue like borders, you might have the right thinking a lot more percentage of the left wants open borders, and the left thinking a lot more percentage of the right wants closed borders. The truth is that most people, whether it's a little more lenient, a little more strict, believe in some kind of immigration policy. The third thing that gives me hope is actually the election, because I think what it showed is, again, one side isn't going to win, take power, and from my view, what I've seen is either, let me back up a minute. There's some people who do not believe in bridging. They want their side to win, and they want, either they think that the other side will, too bad for them, or they think they'll see that their side, my side was right, and people are better off this way. So what I think has happened in the election is, again, we're kind of gridlocked in a way that we have to work together. And just this morning, I got an email from one of the bridging organizations. It's called the One America Movement. And in it, they had this quote: "If nothing else, this election made clear that whether we like it or not, our future is shared. There's no shortcut. We've got to find a way to make this country work for all of us, or face a future that is increasingly toxically divided." So the fourth thing that gives me hope is the amount of emails and new subscriptions I got the day after the election. I didn't know, but somebody had mentioned me in an article, and even old people who had been on my emailing list, a lot of people got in touch. So I felt like, okay, I feel like there's a real tipping point right now. And I've been working in the field for 4 years, and I'm feeling like my sense of it is that people want to find a new way forward. And I'm really heartened that you all showed up tonight and signed up and you're here. So my second point is about inspiration. And as I was writing this, it occurred to me that um, I wonder if inspiration is the bridge between hope and action. And I'm just sitting with that still, you know, to give some hope about what we can do together, to be inspired, and then to take action on that. The administration, whatever administration is in power, they come and go, but the citizens don't. We are stuck with each other. And one of the things that really disturbs me about what's happening is the relationship between our fellow citizens. Forget the politicians, forget the administrations for right now. And I really feel like bridging is a voice for that exhausted majority that I talked about before. We can't get a divorce. We're really in this together, whether we like it or not. And the fact that you all are here signals to me that you're curious about how we can go forward. So what I really hope in all my work at the very minimum is to reduce the hatred and the toxicity and the demonization and the fear that other people have of each other side to side. Some people talk about love thy neighbor, but I also think maybe a better short-term goal is to just not hate your neighbor. You know, how can we calm ourselves down and see, at least not see through that lens of the other side being evil or bad. So the third part of that, if we mix the hope and the inspiration, is what you can do. A big part of this problem is that we're in a two-party system. It leaves no room for nuance. I know that there's a couple organizations that are really trying to bring up the possibility of a third party or as a viable possibility. So I'm hoping for 2024, if we don't kill our fellow people in between time, that there's a chance for some more moderate, some more bridging, bipartisan kind of candidates on both sides. But you know, really what I'm interested in is what we can do as individuals. We can't wait for the politicians or the media or social media or institutions to change. And so my point of view is, instead of waiting or hoping for things to change out there, we can work on changing things in here. And that's basically from where I come with all my work. There's a guy named Mike Johnson. He's a former journalist, and he's worked in Republican administrations before. And I pulled this quote from him: "The people themselves must put an end to divisiveness. Only the citizenry can reduce the excessive influence of partisanship and discredit the negativity." So we are all empowered to do that in our everyday interactions. How we respond to people who are bashing other sides, or do we not get into the fray? Are we going to elevate the conversation? Are we going to not escalate? Are we going to de-escalate? And I'll give you some ideas about that later. It was really hard for me to think about what I wanted to let you know in 20 minutes, because I could talk forever about all this stuff. But what I hope this is helpful, but what's been really helpful for me and what I've developed over these years is a kind of what I call a scaffolding. Like, how do I think, what are the elements of bridging? What needs to happen? Why do we bridge? You know, and how do we get there? So Stephen Covey, who some of you know, he said, start with the end in mind. And so the end, one way of framing the end is, how do we do good better together? Because the other half of the country, whatever that other half is for anybody here on the call, is not going away. So to be able to do that, to be able to do good better together, we need to do a series of things. And although they're not linear, they seem to have, what I've noticed is, they seem to have some foundational parts. They build on each other. And the first thing, I think, is to deal with our feelings about the other side. Watch when we're generalizing and stereotyping. Like we saw with the perception gap, we are a lot more nuanced than ticking a blue box or a red box. And those are our choices right now. We can deal with our dehumanizing of the other side. dehumanizing leads to what's called moral exclusion. So there may be, and it may be different for you. So I am generalizing here, but for some people who they demonize on the other side, they aren't privy, they don't get the golden rule applied to them. We can morally be inconsiderate about them. The other thing that we need to do is we need to learn how to critically think. Now, the irony about this, and actually studies have shown this, is that many people think that they think critically, but not those people on the other side. They're not thinking properly. I'll tell you, my whole journey around this bridging thing, it's been really, really challenging, to own certain things about myself. And so I'm a big proponent of, instead of trying to critically think, it's more like also working at it from what gets in the way of critical thinking. One of the things that happens is there's a real lack of viewpoint diversity in most discourse these days, because people stay in their echo chambers, whether it's with their media, with their friends, with their social media. And we need to be able to look at all viewpoints, to be able to zoom out. I call it zooming out, so I can get the biggest picture possible. And if I am triggered and dehumanizing of the others, I can't think about and consider what people are really saying who have an opposite point of view as I do. I'm going to turn on gallery view for a minute because I want to ask you a question and I want to see a raise of hands. So who here has never been wrong? Marion, yay. But so the question is, why is it so hard to admit that we're wrong, or we don't know, or we've changed our minds? And that we could do a week-long workshop on that, right? Because there's a lot of things that we've been conditioned about, that we feel more secure when we think we know something, when we feel certain. There's a fair amount of shame about not knowing. There's all kinds of things like that. So the lack of humility gets in the way of critical thinking, to be able to, and also to be able to know that the other person might know something that you don't. You might actually learn something. I can't pin myself. Oh, let's see. No, I don't. I'm not being able to pin myself again. Oh, here we go. Okay. The other thing that happens is that we have a certain amount of pre-wiring for our us and them, tribalism. When scientists have shown that when we hear opposing ideas, for some of us, our neurobiology reacts as if we're physically threatened. And another problem is that we have all these cognitive shortcuts and cognitive errors we make. Social scientists have found 188 different ways that our minds play tricks on us. So all these things that I'm talking about are rather automatic. And we need to do what I call a manual override. We need to be aware when it happens and to say, wait a minute, let me pause. I'm getting triggered. Let me take 5 and come back to the conversation. The other thing we really badly need, and this is not easy work, is some media literacy. And we need to really be careful what we take as true on either side of the news media. So those are some of the things that get in the way of our critically thinking. The other thing that I really like to focus on has been, have any of you read the book by Van Jones called Beyond the Messy Truth? It's a really good way that he lays out what's right about the left, what's right about the right, and why we need each other. And I think that's one of the things that really gets lost, is with this demonization and discounting an opposite or another point of view, is we really miss what each side has to offer to the other. And that again is like a whole big workshop. We need to be able to understand, zoom out and understand issues without our partisan lenses. We really do, because we're only getting at best half the story when we only hear what our side thinks about things. The other thing that we need to do better is something I've been exposed to recently called deliberative democracy. And that is the ability to come together as citizens and talk about and debate about things in a reasoned way so that we can come up with the best decisions and the most sound judgments about solving problems. And we can't do that without viewpoint diversity. And if we're pushing away other points of view, we don't get a big enough picture to really know what's going on best we can. So I want to show a clip right now by Arthur Brooks. Some of you may know who he is. And he is a Roman Catholic conservative. He ran the American Enterprise Institute for a number of years, which is a conservative think tank. He wrote a beautiful book called Love Thy Enemies, which is a really, really good bridging book. And this is a very short clip, a couple minutes, about how we need to get rid of contempt in our politics. Okay, Barbara.
Problem in American politics. We don't have an anger problem in American politics. We have a contempt problem in American politics. Contempt is defined by social psychologists as the utter conviction of the worthlessness of another human being. If you listen to people talk to each other in political life today, they talk to each other with pure contempt. When somebody around you treats you with contempt, you never quite forget it. So if we want to solve the problem in polarization today, we have to solve the contempt problem. I sometimes write with the Dalai Lama. I was thinking about this contempt problem. I said, Your Holiness, what do I do when I feel contempt? And he said, practice warm-heartedness. And I started thinking about it, and it's true. When I do that, when we do that, when we have leaders who can do that, it's utterly world-changing. Catch yourself. You can show true strength if next time you hear contempt, you answer with warm-heartedness. Every single one of us is going to have an opportunity on social media or in person to answer somebody's contempt. Are you going to do it the right thing and make the world a little bit better and show your strength and make your enemies your friends? Or are you going to make the problem worse? That's a question that each of us gets to answer probably in the next 24 hours.
So again, all that I've been talking about, including what we just saw, are things we can do ourselves, not waiting for somebody else to do it or trying to force somebody else to do it. There's a lot that you can do to empower yourself to make a change. And I'm a big believer in the ripple effect, and I've seen it in my work. Somebody said something I wanted to mention that, I think it was Michael. We never know. We rarely know the seeds that we've planted, how that might come back to us. So even though the person in front of you might seem closed, there may be something that stays and that later on it clicks on. So my thing is, you can do what it takes to depolarize yourself. You can cultivate humility, what Joe was saying, and the ability also to say, I don't know, I might be wrong. The other person might know something that I don't. We can't do that if we're scared or if our survival mechanisms are ramped up. We didn't talk very much about biases, but there's something called confirmation bias or my side bias, where we're wired to take on, embrace the ideas and facts and data that support our often cherished beliefs and to discount the others. So that needs a manual override too. It's like the question, what am I not seeing here? There's always something we're not seeing. We cannot see all of it. So it's really important, like in the clip we saw, catch ourselves in the act. He was talking about contempt, but there's lots of things we can catch ourselves in. A really important thing to do that we can all do much more easily than the other things is you can refuse to spread hate, divisiveness, or especially information that you're not sure of, either on social media or in conversations. We can complain about the social media doing it, but we can get ourselves out of that loop. And really, if you're gonna repeat something, really make sure that it's true, because once it's out there, it's out there. You can do what it takes to understand yourself. That's a whole big topic, but like we talked about before, understand your triggered reactions, understand your need to feel safe. When you are triggered, remind yourself that everything's okay in the moment and do what you need to calm your nervous system down, and it'll calm the other person's nervous system down too. It really does de-escalate things. And you can do what it takes to understand the other sides. I read a quote, I can't remember where it came from yet, but he talked about cultivating a determination to understand those who think differently than you do. I think it's so important in my own going down the rabbit hole. I understand so much of what's behind what used to be the other side for me. It really is amazing. It just like, I don't use this term very loosely, but I just feel like it's an expansion of consciousness. The other thing about not only understanding them, but seeing what's of value in their perspective. There is things of value in perspectives that are different than ours. And someone talked about values, I think it was Peter. You might be surprised that the values are often the same, but the ways to achieve those values are different. So there's common ground in ways that often we're surprised by. We all have blind spots, and other perspectives can help us see those. You can also do what it takes to stop making this a war of good and bad and right and wrong. And really, I mean, one of the things I really, really try to do in myself is nudge myself towards nuance. Nudge myself towards nuance. I did for those of you on my email list, I did this question, I think it was today, which I got the responses. It was really interesting, but the questions were: find something that you're concerned about your own side, and find something that you think is good on the other side. It's a way of starting to get out of this splitting, this all bad, all good, all right, all wrong, because most of us, all of us are a blend of that. So what I can offer you is, first of all, if you get my newsletters, I'm trying to do these daily or every other day, short things that you can do, depolarizing in 5 minutes. It might be a quote, it might be a little clip, because I think what I'm getting really good feedback back from those things. And it's a way, we're also busy and we're crammed with so much information. It's like, what are these little hints we can do to shake our insides up, to stop being so polarized within? Also, if you're on Facebook, I know a lot of people are getting off, but I have a page called Building Bridgers, and I really carefully curate articles on there. I don't generally get into issues. I get into the nature of polarization. So that's a good way to get some information. I'm in the middle of organizing classes and workshops for the years to come, for next year. And I like the monthly thing group, like 3 hours a month, that kind of thing. So if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, do, and you'll be informed when I start that. I also want to give a shout out to an organization that Ron is involved in. It's called Crossing Party Lines. They're a national organization, and they do really, really great conversations about issues, and they're moderated. So I really highly recommend them. They also do some trainings about how to listen and how to speak, and your brain on politics and things like that. So they give like skill building classes. I don't do that, but it's needed. I want to end with something one of my subscribers wrote to me, which I really loved. He said, inward, inward, and upward. And to me, that really speaks to the work for those of us who want to and have the aptitude to really go within and depolarize within. And I want to have a brief clip at the end. Is there just a brief question kind of functionally about this last bit? I also want to invite any of you, if you have a follow-up question or concern, email me. I really like one-on-one contact a lot. I feel like that's really effective. And I want to leave you with this clip by Catherine Schultz, who wrote a really good book called Being Wrong. She calls herself a wrongologist. And it's a brilliant book about also, this is another point I didn't make today. There's just so many points that I'm so excited about. But one of the things that's so important that I know I've fallen into this trap. I've made very strong moral stances on wrong, inaccurate, partial, outdated, manipulated information. And that's really scary, especially with our media. Her book really, it's easy to read, and it really sets you up to start reviewing. Well, I'll make it an I statement. It really helped me see where I was making moral stances on things I didn't really know about. And some of it was just following my tribe at the time. And I don't have a tribe. I'm politically homeless, which I really like. Okay, so let's see Catherine Schultz. It's just a couple minutes.
Think for a moment about what it means to feel right. It means that you think that your beliefs just perfectly reflect reality. And when you feel that way, you've got a problem to solve, which is, how are you going to explain all of those people who disagree with you? It turns out most of us explain those people the same way, by resorting to a series of unfortunate assumptions. The first thing we usually do when someone disagrees with us is we just assume they're ignorant. They don't have access to the same information that we do, and when we generously share that information with them, they're going to see the light and come on over to our team. When that doesn't work, then we move on to a second assumption, which is that they're idiots. They have all the right pieces of the puzzle, and they are too moronic to put them together correctly. And when that doesn't work, then we move on to a third assumption. They know the truth, and they are deliberately distorting it for their own malevolent purposes. This attachment to our own rightness causes us to treat each other terribly. But you know, to me, what's most baffling and most tragic about this is that it misses the whole point of being human. The miracle of your mind isn't that you can see the world as it is. It's that you can see the world as it isn't. We can remember the past, and we can think about the future, and we can imagine what it's like to be some other person in some other place. And we all do this a little differently, which is why we can all look up at the same night sky and see this, and also this, and also this. And yeah, you know, it is also why we get things wrong. If you really want to rediscover wonder, you need to step outside of that tiny, terrified space of rightness and look around at each other and look out at the vastness and complexity and mystery of the universe and be able to say, wow, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
So we just have a couple more minutes. Anybody have anything to finish